Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on creating engaging PowerPoint presentations. I hope you're all well, wherever you're joining us from today. This is a little bit of a change of speed for me. I normally do the Excel webinars, but today I'm doing a PowerPoint one, which is quite exciting because let's face it, PowerPoint is slightly more fun than Excel. So I am actually quite looking forward to this. For those of you that haven't attended our webinars before, because we always do get a few new people, just to let you know that this is being recorded. So we record all of our sessions and you will receive a copy of the recording along with the presentations that I'm using. So if you want to practice afterwards and go through that recording using the same presentations that I'm going to use today, then you can. So please feel free to do that. The recording goes out 48 hours after this webinar finishes, so you should get it on Friday. And I'm sorry it takes so long. That's not our fault. That's YouTube. We upload all of our videos to YouTube and they do take a long time to upload. So that's why it's 48 hours. But just to let you know, that's the situation with the recording. Hopefully we've got a few regulars on today, so welcome back to you guys. I'll just briefly introduce myself for those of you who don't know who I am. So my name is Deborah Ashby and I'm an IT trainer and Microsoft subject matter expert, and I work at Filtered and Excel with Business, and I've been a trainer for a pretty long time, about 9 years, and just over 22 years in the IT industry. And if you can't tell by the accent, I am based in London in the UK. And I've trained a lot of people over the years at various different companies in Microsoft products and various other applications. So hopefully that means I'm qualified to sit here in front of you and teach you a little bit of PowerPoint today. And hopefully we're going to have some fun in this session as well, because PowerPoint is a really interesting topic. I find with PowerPoint, I'm sure you've sat through, as I have, many presentations over the years, which are pretty bad, if we're honest. They're in general too long, too crammed full of words, boring, all of those things. And what we're aiming for in this session today is just to give you some tips and some tricks and some rules that you can follow to make your PowerPoint presentations just exciting and interesting for people to look at, because there is nothing worse than sitting through a really long, boring presentation. So what I'd like to start out with is just going through 10 golden rules or best practice guidelines which you can employ when you're designing your PowerPoint presentations. And then after we've gone through those rules, we're going to jump into an example and I'm going to show you some tools and techniques in PowerPoint that you can start to employ. So hopefully by the end of this session, you will at least go away having picked up a few new tips and tricks, and hopefully it will give you something to think about as well the next time you design your PowerPoint presentations. All right, so let's start out with our golden rules. Now I'm going to keep these quite short, but avoid busy slides. This is probably my #1 bugbear when it comes to looking at presentations. And again, imagine a presentation that you've sat in the past where you're looking at it and it's just full of words, and the words are quite small and they've done them quite small so they can fit them all onto the slide. And you've got a speaker there who's speaking and you're not really sure if you're supposed to be looking or reading the slide or listening to the speaker. It becomes very confusing because our brains cannot do both things at the same time. So this is one of my bugbears. I would always say try and avoid busy slides, keep them as simple as possible, because it just becomes too overwhelming for the people in your audience. And this would be an example of something, and this is just an example of the solar system, something that's just a bit too busy. There's too much going on here. There's a lot of text, which I might have to read. We've also got a table, we've got some graphics and some text boxes and lots of different things going on. We've also got a background there, which is kind of making that text a bit hard to read as well. So way too busy. I'm not sure what to focus on. It would be a lot better if we could just streamline this slightly, because remember, when you're designing your PowerPoint presentations, you are the one who's given the presentation, and it needs to be you who makes it engaging. Now, if I was redesigning this kind of slide, what I might do would be something like this. I might just use an image, and then I'm the one who's going to elaborate on that. So this doesn't take much for your audience just to look at a nice image, and then they can really listen to what you're saying. So instead of having everything written down here about the solar system, I'm going to say that whilst they just look at a nice image that illustrates what I'm saying. And you'll see as we go through, I am a big fan of using images, large ones, in PowerPoint presentations. So just think about that. So again, what else I might do would be to split up some of this text. So I've got my nice image of the solar system. I'm talking through the text, but I still have that table. So I might put the table maybe onto a different slide, and I might represent it in a different kind of way. So maybe I'll use a nice chart. And that immediately looks a lot cleaner. Instead of cramming everything onto that one slide, I've now separated it out. It's a lot easier for people to understand, and no one's going to feel overwhelmed. So really think about the contents of your slide and how you can make it as simple and as clean as possible. So that would be my first point. The next one, now people always gasp when I say this, do not use bullet points. Now this doesn't apply in every situation. There might be situations where you do need to use a bullet point, but in general, try and shy away from the use of bullet points. And you might think, well, why? What's wrong with bullet points? Well, there's nothing really wrong with bullet points, but what I would say to you is when you next look at a presentation from a company like Apple or maybe Microsoft, if you look at their slides, you'll notice that they don't use bullet points. And the reason being is that it's just a lot cleaner when you don't use bullet points. And again, this would be an example of something which has bullet points. It's not horrendous, it's fine, but it might be more interesting and cleaner to lay it out in something like that. And again, these are just examples I've put together, but I always find it quite interesting that a lot of the large tech companies never use bullet points in their presentations. I think the feeling behind that is that it looks less professional. So graphics and no bullet points in general are preferred by those kinds of companies. So again, it will be your call, but just think about that the next time that you're going through and creating a presentation. I can see there's a couple of questions coming in. It's a little bit hard for me to answer them when we're on the webinar. I will allow some time at the end for questions, so hold fire and I'll make sure that we get those answered at the end. Next one, the rule of 6. Now you might be thinking, what on earth is this? Well, there is a rule or an unwritten rule in PowerPoint that all the points that you have on your slide should be brief. And this plays into that whole, don't try and put everything that you're saying onto the slide. That's what you're there for. You're there saying whatever it is you need to say, and really the points on your slide are just there as a prompt, a short version of what it is that you're saying. So the rule of 6 would be, in general, try and keep the number of points you have on a slide to 6 points. And if you can, try and keep them to under 6 words. Again, might be hard in some situations, but in general, that's kind of the rule that we have within PowerPoint. Remember, it's just keywords, reminders of what you're talking about next. And that might be an example of that. So just keep them under 6 words and to 6 points. The next one, pick large fonts. Again, another bugbear of mine when I'm watching presentations. What I find a lot of people do is, in an effort to fit a lot of text onto a slide, what they'll tend to do is they'll start to make the font size smaller and smaller and smaller so that they can fit more in the box that they're typing. And it just makes it so difficult for people to read, particularly if you're in a large room and you're giving a presentation. And it just really doesn't look great. The recommended size for font in PowerPoint when you're giving a presentation is actually 28 points, which is pretty large. But again, you should be splitting things up across multiple slides if you have a lot of points to cover. Too much on a slide is too overwhelming for people to read. So again, pick a slightly larger font than what you might normally. And another bugbear, excessive animation. Who's ever received a presentation or seen a presentation where someone's gone a bit crazy with their animation? I think I have a bit of an example, and this is quite extreme, but you know, and this normally happens when people have just learnt how to use animation. They go a little bit crazy, and we have all kinds of things happening on a slide. And whilst that's kind of fun and animation has its place, too much animation is just, it's unprofessional, and it also just makes your slides look a little bit crazy and not very consistent. Now, there is a place for animation, and we're going to go through an example of how to use animation well. And animation should be used to enhance your slide, not detract from it. And sometimes with animation, it does tend to detract rather than enhance. So think about the animation that you're using as well. It should be subtle, shall we say. The next one, as I said, I'm a big fan of using visuals instead of text. And statistically speaking, or it's been statistically proven, that people remember images over text way better. And I can actually prove this, because if I think back to all the presentations that I've attended over the years, there's always one that stands out in my mind. And it was a few years ago. I was in Greece at a Microsoft conference, and the speaker came on, and his PowerPoint presentation just basically had a picture of a rugby team. And he came wandering onto the stage wearing a rugby top and carrying a rugby ball. And then he started his presentation. And it's just always really stood out in my mind, that image of just this rugby team on the slide and him standing there with a rugby ball. It was a really great way of helping me remember certain parts of that presentation. And that's what visuals are designed to do. People can connect ideas to visual images better than reams and reams of text. So I'm a big fan of using large images. And this is an example of one. Now, you might look at this and think, whoa, that's a bit morbid. Yes, it is. But I'm going to guess that next week, if you were to think back to this presentation, this is probably going to be the slide that you're going to remember. It kind of punctuates your thought process. I've given a really kind of shocking visual there, and then I might go in to start talking about the use of PowerPoint. So large images are always much better than small images, and stay well away from clip art or anything that comes across as a cartoon style image. Again, cartoon images, clip art never looks good in a presentation, particularly if it's a business presentation. So try and stick to high quality images. Now, one other word about images. You do have to be a little bit careful with regards to copyright. So think about sort of who's going to see this presentation. And I am going to give you some links to some resources where you can get a whole host of royalty-free images, icons, lots of useful things you can use in your presentations. I use these websites all the time, and you don't have to give any kind of accreditation. It's all royalty-free, so you don't have to pay anything for them. So I'll give you those links at the end of this section. All right, use high contrast colors. Again, think about the kind of background that you're using, the background color and the text that you're placing on that background. So again, you can never go wrong with a white background and a darker color text. I would shy away from dark backgrounds. Even if you have a dark background with white text on it, that's quite hard on the eyes for a lot of people. So I would tend to stick to lighter color backgrounds and a darker text. You want people to be able to read what's on the presentation, and you also don't want to give them a headache. So think about that when you're building your PowerPoint presentations out. Looping introduction. Now, this is one that I'm going to show you when we go into creating our PowerPoint presentation. And it's a technique that I don't see that much when I attend presentations, but it's probably a technique that you encounter on a reasonably frequent basis just in your everyday lives, and you may not even realize it. So for example, at the airport, or maybe in a shop, anywhere that has a large kind of screen, you may or may not have noticed that sometimes, if you think about at an airport, you might have a television there, and it will have some information on the screen, and then after 5 seconds it will move on to another piece of information, and then it will move on. So it kind of goes in a loop round and round, lots of pieces of information, and we call that a looping introduction. And you can do that with your PowerPoint slides. And you might think, well, why on earth would I want to do that? Again, if you are presenting to an audience, so maybe it's a group of colleagues or another group of people, when they first come into that session or when they first come into the meeting room, instead of just having a static slide up there, why not give them something interesting to look at? So we're going to create a looping introduction, which is going to contain all kinds of things. So it might contain some motivational quotes. It might contain a question that I want them to think about. It might contain a chart, or it might contain my contact information, and it's going to loop around. And it just means that your audience aren't sitting there bored at the beginning of the presentation playing with their phones. It gives them something to engage with immediately whilst you're waiting for other people to arrive, whilst you're waiting to start your session. Okay, really, really nice little technique that not many people tend to employ, but I'm going to show you how you can do it because it's actually quite simple. Be aware of your audience. Another really important one when you're designing a PowerPoint presentation. You really need to think about who you're presenting to. What are they there for? What are they trying to get out of this presentation, this meeting, this session? And what do you need them to go away with? And once you have those things locked in your mind, it's a lot easier to build your presentation around that, to know that you've pitched it at the correct level. So be aware of who you're presenting to always. That's first and foremost should be in your mind. And finally, less is more. Keep it short, keep it sweet. Again, I've seen presentations which were like 75 slides long, and honestly, it's, you know, it really is. By the time you get to the end of it, you feel like you've run a marathon. And you don't want anybody to feel sort of overloaded by the time they leave your meeting. So think about the size of your slides as well. So how many slides you're using, and always bear in mind the slides are there to enhance your presentation. You're the one who's given the information. You don't have to put everything on the slides. Okay, quality over quantity is what I'm trying to say. So those are the 10 points. So I've just laid them out there again. And remember, you are going to receive a copy of this presentation so you can refer back to them. So again, just to recap, avoid a wall of words or too busy slides. Do not use bullet points or use them minimally. No more than 6 words. So that's our rule of 6. And remember to pick large fonts. Avoid that excessive animation, and wherever possible, try and use visuals instead of text. Use high contrast colors so that people can see any text that you do put on the screen. And think about possibly employing techniques like a looping introduction to keep your people engaged in your presentation. Be aware of your audience and why they're there, and keep it short and sweet. So those are kind of the 10 golden rules. Hopefully that will give you something to think about the next time that you create a presentation. All right, now I did mention that I was going to show you some resources for some free images, and these are kind of the ones that I use, with the top 2 being the ones I use most often. So sites like Pexels and Unsplash, and I'll show you Pexels in a moment, have really, really lovely, high quality, very modern looking images that you can use for free in your PowerPoint presentations. There is also Shutterstock. Now, Shutterstock does have some free images on it, so it is always worth having a little look there. Another one I really like is Noun Project. If you're ever looking for icons or little symbols or things like that, Noun Project is fantastic. I will say, with the free version of Noun Project, you can only download icons in black, which for me most of the time is fine. But that's a really good source for icons. And then Slides Carnival is a really great resource for PowerPoint templates and various other tools that you can use. I'll just very quickly show you the top one, which is Pexels, so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. So I've just got it here. So this is Pexels. And what you can do is you can search for the image that you're looking for. So if I was maybe looking for a picture of somebody thinking, I can just very easily search for it. and it brings back loads of high quality images that I can just download and I can use in my presentations. And they have a really nice modern feel to them, so they make your presentations super nice. So that is one of the sites that I use all of the time for images in my PowerPoint presentations. And as I said, you are going to receive a copy of my presentation, so you will have those links, but those are really, really nice. All right, shall we jump into a presentation now and start to build it out? I'm just going to quickly check the chat just to make sure that everybody is okay and still with me. You can just give me a big yes if everybody is okay and you're still with me, haven't fallen asleep. Yes, thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Victor. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure you're all still alive. Okay. Let's jump into the presentation we're going to look at today. Now, you'll notice when I pull this up, this isn't a business presentation. This is a fun presentation that I've put together to make it a little bit more interesting for you. But the content of my slides is not important here. What is important are the techniques that I'm showing you, which can be used in any kind of presentation that you're doing, regardless of the subject matter. So if you tend to mainly do very business type presentations, don't worry so much. It's really just the techniques that I want to show you. So what we're going to do, and my presentation is about the Oscars. I just want to make sure I've got the right presentation here. Yes, it's this one. And I'm going to start at the beginning here. Now, before we get going, I just want to run through each slide because I want to go through and show you what we're going to be looking at and the topics that we're going to be covering with each slide. So this is kind of a presentation on the Oscars 2018. I'm a big movie fan. Is anybody else a big movie fan? Type into the chat panel if you love a movie. Yeah, I love a movie. I just watched one of these movies that I'm going to go through. I just watched The Shape of Water. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a bit bizarre, but I absolutely loved it. And so I included it in my presentation today. So this presentation is about the Oscars, not the ones that have just gone, the ones the year before. And we're going to go through this presentation. Now, this slide is very blank at the moment. We just have a title and we just have a subtitle. Now, what I'm going to show you on this slide is I want to talk to you a little bit about using slide layouts and also about adjusting things like the master slides. Now, master slides tend to strike the fear of God into people because nobody knows how they work. And they are a little bit confusing, but I just want to show you, explain to you what they are and how they can be useful to you. So we'll look at master slides as well. And I'm also going to show you how you can put headers and footers on your slides. So that's all going to be done on our fairly plain looking slide. We're then going to move on to looking at, and you can see this one is kind of partly done. We're going to be looking at various different things when we construct this slide. So you can see here I have 3 images currently. We're going to add a 4th. So we're going to look at how you can insert images into your slides and how you can resize them consistently. So I want the image that I put in here to be exactly the same size as these other 3. And there's just a couple of little tricky things related to that. So I want to show you how to resize correctly, how you can use guidelines to ensure there's an even amount of space. And we're also going to look at how you can hyperlink. So for example, I want to be able to click on this picture and jump to another slide. So we're going to look at how we can hyperlink between slides as well, which makes it really easy and nice to navigate. And then we're going to build out our main kind of slides. So again, this is just my love of using very large images. So I'm going to show you how you can kind of get this nice modern kind of slide design going. And we're going to look at a couple of techniques. So again, inserting pictures. We're going to look at inserting shapes and also grouping shapes together and aligning shapes. How we can use the format painter as well, and also how we can utilize the eyedropper utility in PowerPoint, which will allow us to make sure that the colors that we're using in our slide are consistent and they all match. So those are some of the techniques that we're going to go through when we build out one of these slides. And these ones are all fairly similar. On this slide, what we're going to do is, this is where we're going to look at animation, and I'm going to show you how you can animate a slide effectively yet subtly. As I said before, we don't want lots of crazy animation coming in, but I'm going to show you how you can apply animation to this slide and apply it in a way that's really nice. And we're going to employ a technique called dimming as well, which might be something that you've come across, or it might not. And again, this is a really nice little technique which kind of allows you to spotlight a certain item on your slide. And that might not make much sense to you right now, but it will do when we go through the example. So animation is going to be covered on this slide. And then I have 5 slides at the end. So this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And what I'm going to do with these 5 slides is, this is what's going to be my looping introduction. And if you remember, I talked about that at the beginning. It's where we have slides scrolling around at timed intervals automatically to give people something interesting to look at while they're waiting for you to begin your presentation. So I'm going to show you how you can take these 5 slides and package them up quite nicely and use them as looping slides at the beginning. So that's basically what we're going to go through. I'm also going to add some things onto the end of this where we're just going to talk a little bit about how you can print slides and also create things like handouts for your audience and things like that. So hopefully you'll be able to fit all of that into the half an hour or so that we've got left. So we're going to go through all of these techniques. I just want to check in with you again. Does that sound okay to everybody? Yes. Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. Wonderful. All right. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Now, as I said, this first slide that we have here is fairly plain, and this is where I want to talk to you initially about slide layout. Now, when you're using PowerPoint, if you're starting from a blank presentation, you're probably going to go to the home ribbon and you'll probably want to insert some new slides. And you'll see as I click the lower half of the new slide button, I get a number of different templates essentially that I can use. And this one here is a title slide, for example. We've got title and content, section header, lots of different ones, or you can just have a good old blank if you want to. And these are there to help you. Now, this slide that I have here is a title slide. Now, you might think, well, how can I tell what layout I have applied to my slide? Well, again, in this slides group, if you go up to the layout drop down, you'll see the one that is highlighted is the one that you currently have applied to your slide. So I can see that I have a title slide just here. And you can change the layout if you want to. Now, the reason why I point out these layouts is because they are quite important when it comes to working with master slides. And we'll get onto that in just a moment, okay? Now, so I have a title slide applied and I'm fairly happy with that. The first thing I'm going to do to make this slide a little bit more interesting is I'm going to add a header, or actually I'm just going to add a footer onto my slide. Now, the footer, or the header and footer option, you'll find on the insert ribbon in this text group, and you can see we have an option for header and footer. And I've got various different things that I can add onto my slide, and it's entirely up to you what you put on there. I'm going to choose to have the date and time, which I've set to update automatically. It means that the time's always going to be up to date on my slide. If I didn't want it to always be up to date, so maybe I wanted it more to show people when the slide deck was created, I could say fixed down here if I wanted to. I'm going to have the slide number on there, and you can see as I select these, if you look in the preview window at the side, it's showing me where this information is going to go in the footer. So the date and time is the little black bar on this little preview window. When I click on slide number, you'll see it's going to go over on the side, and I'm going to add the footer in the middle, which is just going to say the Oscars 2018. And then I have the option to apply to all of my slides or just apply to this one. So again, that really depends on how you want your slides to look. Now, I don't want this on all of my slides because some of my slides contain images, which means you're not going to be able to see the footer. So I just want it on this first slide. So I'm going to select Apply. And there we go. And I'm not particularly happy with how that little footer's looking down there. That's not particularly nice. So I'm going to go in. You'll see it just puts it in a text box. And I don't particularly like that. I'm going to delete that out. It's a bit weird. I'm just going to leave it like that with my date and my title. Now, what I am going to do is in this corner is I'm going to have a little image. And for you, in your practical day-to-day use of PowerPoint, it might be something like a company logo that you want to put onto your slides or some kind of image. And this is where we move into talking about master slides. Does anybody here, and again, type into the chat panel, does anybody here find master slides a little bit confusing? Just say yes if you do, or no if you're perfectly fine with them. I know that when I was learning, I found them confusing. Someone's just put, I think that says it all. Rosemary, great. I'm glad that you know how to use them, Rosemary, because they still sometimes really confuse me, and I'm supposedly an expert, so I don't know what hope we all have. So. All right, now I'm going to try and talk you through how master slides work. Now you'll find if you want to go into your master slides, they're on the, I think they're on the view ribbon. Yes, they are. Now, if you're not sure even what a master slide is, every time you create a PowerPoint presentation, PowerPoint automatically in the background creates master slides for your presentation. And you can view those master slides, as I said, from the view ribbon by going into Slide Master. And that will essentially reveal all of the slides that are controlling your presentation. And we go into here. And let me just make those a little bit bigger. Now, this is where it gets confusing because some of these are linked together and some of them aren't. Now, what you have in here, these are the master slides, and you have one for each layout. So you can see here, before, when we were looking at the different layouts, and it's not going to let me go into it. No, it's not. That's annoying. When we were looking at the different layouts before, where we had title, then we had title and content, and we had about 6 or 7 different layouts, there is a master slide for each layout. And what you can do is if you wanted, say, a company logo on every single slide of your presentation, if you, it might be that you don't want to have to go through and manually put the image of the logo on every single slide. If you've got a slide deck that's like 50 slides long, that's going to be really time consuming to put a logo on each of those slides manually. That's where Slide Master comes in. It means you can just add it onto the master slide and it will appear on all of the slides that are based on that layout. Okay, and that's a really important point because you'll see here, if I was to put a logo on this first one here, so this is the master title slide, if I was to put a logo on here, the logo will only appear on all the other slides that are in this layout, that are in this master title slide, okay? So that's a point to remember. Now I'm going to do this so that you can see, but I'm just quickly going to go and grab an image, so bear with me. I'm going to jump across. I'm just going to grab this little logo image from my other version of this presentation. Where am I going? I'm going into Slide Master. I'm just going to quickly grab this, copy and paste it, because I'm a little cheat like that. And if I come back to here and I want to put that image on, ooh, like so, I can. And because this is the main one, it's controlling the rest of these slides, it's put it on all of them, okay? Now, I'll only see this on the slides where it's applied to that particular layout. So it's applied it to all of them, which is fine. However, if I didn't want it across all of my slides, I could not put it on this first one, which is the master slide, which is controlling everything, and just add it to these individual ones. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense, but let me close out of there. And you'll now see that I have it on my slides. It's actually covered up by the image on these ones, but we have our little thing on the master slide. So go into the master slides, add the image to the master slide that you want it to appear on. And remember that top one is linked to all the others. So if you put it on the first one, it's going to flow through to the rest of the masters. So essentially the image will be on all of your slides. If you don't want it on all of the slides, don't put it on that first one, just add it to whichever master it is that's in use in your presentation. That's the best way that I can describe it to you. It's a little bit complicated concept to get your head around sometimes. But it does save you a lot of time. You don't have to go through and put those images on, and we always like anything that's going to save us time. Now, moving on to the next slide, let's start getting into some of the more fun, interesting things. Now, what I have here is 3 movies currently, and I've left a space for the 4th one, which we're going to add on. And the things that we're going to be looking at on this slide are obviously how to add an image. I'm going to show you how to resize an image effectively, because there's a couple of little weird things with this. I'm going to show you how to use grid lines, and we're also going to do some hyperlinking, which is going to allow us to jump around to different slides. So a few techniques in play here. But first up, let's insert our 4th movie. And this is just a very basic insert picture. I've already saved these images off to my desktop. Okay, so save your image first, then go to insert. And you could go to online pictures if you wanted to, but I've saved them off because I'm old school like that. And I'm going to find the image I want, which is this one, 3 billboards. I'm going to insert it. Now, it's put that image in, rather big, and I want to make it the same size as the rest of the images on here. Now, of course, I could use my drag handles in the corner just to drag that in, and it'll probably take me a few attempts. And even then, I still might not get it exactly the same size as, say, this one, okay? Because it's a bit hard to do when you're just manually dragging in and out. So if I'm being particularly pedantic about the sizing on my images, what I would tend to do is click on this image here, and then you'll see at the top in the format ribbon, way over on the right-hand side in the size group, you can see the size of the image that you're clicked on. So I can see that the height is currently 4.26 inches and the width is 2.79. So I can now use those to resize this image, and I'll know that it's exactly the same size as this one. Okay, now this is a bit of a weird thing. If I was just to start typing it into here, and I've forgotten the size already, 4.26 by 279. Let's type that in. 4.26. Now you'll see when I start to type in 279, the 4.26 isn't going to stay. Ooh. Go back to the format. So you'll see I've put in 2.79, but it's adjusted the height to 3.55. And that's because if you go into this little drop down in the size group, so where we have this little arrow, and we get this little format picture thing come up, we've got this option ticked, lock aspect ratio. And that means it's going to try and do its own resizing. So if I say it's not going to allow me to manually specify the size, it's going to resize it as to what it or what PowerPoint thinks is the correct size for it. So it's always good to come in and unlock the aspect ratio, and then you can manually type in what you want it to be. And once again, I've forgotten because I've got a memory like a sieve. 4.26, there we go. 4.26. And this time notice that it hasn't changed, it's stayed the same. Do I want it at 2.79? Yes, I do. There we go. All right, so just be wary of that, and I can now see that my image is the same size as this one. So remember, take the tick out of that lock aspect ratio if you want to manually control the sizing. Otherwise, you might get some weird results. So now I've got my image and I'm dragging it over here, and you'll see as I'm dragging this around my screen, I get these little guidelines come up all over the place. And these are really cool, actually. They just help you reposition things evenly based on other objects on your slide. So if I want to position this, I might kind of put it just here. And another technique I like to use is holding down the shift key and dragging, which means it's going to drag it sort of along a straight line plane, I should say. So it sort of kind of locks it there in a way. And I can also see that I now have two little arrows appear at the bottom there, which is telling me that that's an equal distance away from the image next to it. So that's really a great way of being able to position objects so that they're nicely lined up. This one probably needs to move very slightly. I probably need to adjust that one a little bit, but you can fiddle around with these and do whatever you want with them. But just a couple of really nice little techniques in there for images. Now, another thing I want to show you on here is hyperlinking. So I want to be able to click on one of these images and jump to the relevant slide down here. And we're going to do it for 3 billboards, but you'll notice that I don't actually have the 3 billboards slide created yet. So we're going to create the slide for the 3 billboards first, and then we're going to hyperlink to it. So we can just click on this image and jump to that particular slide. So let's go down to this bottom one just here. Now, one thing I do want to tell you about, I'm gonna create a new slide in here. So I'm just gonna go new slide. I'm gonna do a blank slide. Now, what I noticed earlier when I was running through this is that there is a slight difference between PowerPoint 2019 and PowerPoint 2016. Now, I'm using 2019 currently, that's what I'm using now. It doesn't look a great deal different from 2016 or 2013, but it does appear that there are a few different options in it. The reason why I'm using it is because I'm currently writing a course on PowerPoint 2019, hence why I'm using this. But one disadvantage of 2019 is that I just noticed this morning that it doesn't actually have the option that I wanted to show you next. And the option I wanted to show you was the slide design ideas area. Now, if you have PowerPoint 2016 or Office 365 or even 2013, I think, you will have this option. And what it is just the way this slide is designed currently. You can see we have a nice background image and we have this kind of nice graded circle in here, which makes the slide kind of look really modern and really nice. This was actually generated automatically for me when I added this image into the presentation. And it was generated because PowerPoint 2016 has a new feature called the slide designer or the PowerPoint designer. And I was hoping to show it to you today, but when I was going through this morning with my new 2019 version, I don't appear to have it, which is unfortunate. But I will show you how it will work when you go to do it. Now, to invoke or bring up the PowerPoint slide designer, all you need to do is insert an image into your slide and it will automatically pop up for you, okay? Now, it's not going to when I do it, but if I was just to insert a picture, and again, let's just do this one here. What happens in PowerPoint 2016 is you'll get a pane appear on the right-hand side just here, and it will show you lots and lots of different slide designs, and one of them is this one, okay, which gives us this nice kind of look and feel to our presentation. So it automatically pops up whenever you put an image in. If you don't want it, you can just close it down, but it will give you a few options for different slide designs. So try that on yours and see if you have it. If you do have it, another way to check if you've got it or not is to go into File and down to Options, and in this general area, if you do have the slide designer, if you scroll down to the bottom, again, I don't have it, but underneath this startup options group, you'll have another group that says PowerPoint designer, and you can choose to turn it off and on. So if you find it quite annoying that it pops up every time you put an image in, you could turn it off, okay? So just be aware of that. I'm sorry I can't show it to you. I didn't actually realize I didn't have it in this version until this morning. But that is how I basically created this slide. I modified the text, but the general layout was using the designer. So because I don't have that, how can I get around it to create my next slide? Well, I'm just going to duplicate this slide and we're going to modify it. Now, I love duplicating slides as opposed to copying and pasting them, just because it's a few less keyboard presses. So to duplicate a slide, Control D, very quick and easy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete out this image because we're not using this one, like so. And I'm going to add in my new image for 3 billboards. And we just saw it, so I'm going to go grab it again. And you'll see it appears over the top of the little circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say from the format ribbon, we have this little arrange group. And again, I use this all the time for moving or placing objects on my slide. We have a little send backward and send to back option. So I've got this highlighted. I want the text to appear on top of this. So I'm going to send this image to the back. Okay, if you think of presentations or slides are like layers, so you layer things on top of each other and you can move them forward and backwards using this arrange group. So now I've got it in the background, which is kind of what I want, and I'm going to just position it and I'm going to resize it, and I have my slide size set to something that's quite wide. Now I wouldn't generally recommend distorting images like that, but I have quite a wide selection on mine. And there we go, very quickly I've been able to create that nice slide. And if I had the slide designer, it would be even quicker. Now I'm going to make some modifications over here. Obviously the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to modify some of the text. And we'll just call it 3 billboards. And I'm going to replace this text, and we just have the text in a text box currently. And I've got the text actually set up just here just to make it quicker. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in. And it's going to paste all a little bit strange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my little paste options button. And I'm just going to select to keep text only, like so. And I'm going to do a little bit of reformatting here. And hopefully we're all fairly familiar with how to do basic formatting on text. So I'm just going to change it to black, like so. Now, a couple of other things I want to do just to demonstrate a couple of utilities that I use when I'm creating presentations. It's really important with regards to sort of keeping the consistency of your presentation to kind of keep the colors consistent within the slide. So I want to, for example, make the words director, starring, and synopsis a different color so they stand out. But I'm not just going to go in and change them to like a lime green or a bright red. It's not going to really match the color scheme that I have in my slide. What I want to do is I want to make these, I want to choose a color that's already within my slide. And this is where we can use the eyedropper utility. So I'm going to take the word director, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to go up to my little text format or font color tool, click the drop down, and I have an eyedropper tool. And that will allow you to roll over any part of your image and use that to color your text. So I might want to have it the same color as the billboard, like so. And I really love that feature. It just makes it so easy for getting colors consistent within your presentations. And you can do that for shapes and anything else you basically insert. You'll have that eyedropper utility. So that's the color I want. I'm now going to use my format painter just to paint that across the other two. So double click to highlight. Now with format painter, it will take obviously the formatting and allow you to apply the same formatting to something else. But if you want to do, it will only apply it once. So if I click format painter now, I can go down and I can double click on starring, and that's fine. But if I go to do it on synopsis, you can see the format painter has toggled itself off. So what you need to do, and if I just undo, if you want to kind of use the format painter a few times, what you need to do is highlight and double click on the format painter. And that will then allow you to paint continuously until you turn the format painter off again. All right, so that's another little tip. It always used to throw me. I was like, this is so annoying. It'll only let me paint one thing. Little did I know, double click was the key. So we've got some consistent coloring going on in our presentation. And what I have down here are some stars. So the rating for this particular movie, and these are basically just created using shapes. So again, if I go to insert and go to shapes, I can just go in and I can just draw these shapes. Now, again, if I want to make the shape kind of consistent, if you hold down your shift key as you drag, it means it will resize nicely. You won't sort of get a really kind of skinny star or a star that's too wide. It will resize it consistently. And then all I've done is duplicate the shape. So again, Control D, and I've done that 5 times. Control D each time. Okay, and then it's just a matter of positioning those stars however you want. And remember, you have your align utilities up here, which you can use to really get those stars lined up nicely. All right, so I won't go into doing that. I think it's reasonably straightforward, and we have got about 10 minutes or so left. So I'll move on to the next slide. And this one is related to adding animation into your presentations. And as I said again, you want your animation to be subtle and effective, not crazy and overwhelming. So what I want here is I want to be able to bring up each of the movie names one at a time, okay? And then when I move on to the next one, I want the previous one to kind of fade into the background. So it really highlights the movie that I'm talking about at that particular time. And that's a technique called dimming, all right? So first of all, let's deal with the animation. So this is put into here. Again, this is just an image that I've downloaded off the web and added in. And I've just added a text box and put the movies in here. And I want these to appear one by one. So I'm going to add in some animation. I'm going to highlight the first one. I'm going to go to the animations ribbon. And with animation, you have a few different options. Let's look at the drop down. Now again, some people find this a little bit overwhelming. You've got entrance, emphasis, and exit. And it really depends when you want your animation to kind of activate, shall we say. So I normally apply mine on the entrance. Some people like to apply it as an emphasis, and some people like to apply it as an exit. And what we mean by that is when you move on to the next piece of animation, do you want the animation to kind of run as you're moving on, or do you want it to run at the beginning, or do you want it to run sort of after you've brought up the piece of text? I, in general, have it on the entrance, but again, it's entirely up to you. And I'm really, really dull with my animation. I tend to always use like the same two. I tend to either have my something coming in from the side, or the one I use most often is just the very, very subtle fade. I like my points to fade in and fade out again, just because it's just not too crazy. So I'm going to choose fade. And one thing that is a little bit annoying with this is you can't apply it all in one go. If you want the points to come in individually, you have to go in and you have to highlight and you have to do every single one individually. So just, you know, talk amongst yourselves while I quickly run through this. In fact, I'll only do it to this lot. I won't bother about the ones on the other side. I'm sure you'll get the idea. So I'm just adding the same animation to each one of these. Now, when you're building up animation, you'll get this little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next to them. And I always like to have the animation pane open. If you see here, we have the animation pane button. And that just allows you to see a little bit better the animation that you've applied to each of these. And if I just play my slides, so I'm going to go to the slideshow just so you can see what happens. So now when I click my mouse, Ladybird fades in. I might want to talk about Ladybird. Then the next one, Phantom Thread, the post, so on and so forth. So it's a very subtle piece of animation. It's just a nice fade. I love that one, but you can choose whichever one you like. Now, as I said, I like to use this dimming or spotlight technique. And what that is, if you've never encountered it before, if I go to my animation pane, and we're just going to apply it to the first one, Ladybird, you'll see as I hover over, I get a little drop down, and I'm going to go into Effect Options. And by default, everything is always set to don't dim, okay? Now, there is no dim option. It's either don't dim or you select a color you want to dim to. Now, I'm going to do more colors. I'm just going to select a color that's very similar to my background. So we'll put something that's kind of like that. I still want to be able to see the point, but I don't want it to be very obvious. And click on OK. Now you might be thinking, well, what does that do? Let me show you. Ladybird fades in. I can talk about Ladybird. Then when I move on to my next point, it fades out. And you could fade it out even more than that if you wanted to. But it's just a way of being able to kind of really put the emphasis on the point that you're talking about at that moment and have everything else fade into the background. So dimming is a really nice technique. And again, you would have to go through and apply it to each of them, you know, as you wanted to. And you could also have it fade out completely into a black background if you wanted to. But that's a little technique that I don't see many people using. I think it's just really subtle, nice and effective technique to use. So that's dimming and a little bit of animation. Now, something else I wanted to show you was, if we go back, now we have our slide, I want to jump back to this slide just here, because I was going to show you how to insert hyperlinks so that we can jump. So what I want to do is I want to be able to click on this image here and have it jump down to the new slide that we've created. Again, very simple to do. Click on the image, right-click your mouse, and you have hyperlink. And what this will do is, if you select place in this document, it will give you all of your slides, and you just need to select the slide that you want to jump to. So there I have 3 billboards, and I could add a little screen tip so that when people hover over the image, they know what it is. So I could say, click to jump to 3 billboards. You can put whatever you like in here and click on OK. So you'll see now when I hover over it, I get that little screen tip pop up, click to jump to 3 billboards. Now I'm not going to be able to click it until I go into slideshow mode, but now you'll see when I hover over, I get the little hand icon, and when I click on it, it jumps me to that particular slide. Okay, so that's a really nice way of being able to link your slides together. What you also might like to do on some slides is maybe add things like back arrows and hyperlink those. So if I wanted to add something like a little back arrow, I could just grab the shape and I could format that how I wanted to. But if I right click and do hyperlink, I could do the same thing, and maybe I wanted to jump back to that main page. So nominations, best picture. And then when I run the slideshow, I can click on the arrow and it will jump me back to that slide. So a really nice way of being able to navigate quite effectively amongst your presentation. Now we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to make sure we have time for some questions, but I do really want to show you these looping slides. Now, as I said, these last few slides here, I want to have those scrolling round as people are kind of joining my presentation. So I'm going to create a little custom slideshow. Now, if you're going to do looping slides, you want to make sure, first of all, that all of the slides are at the beginning of your presentation. So I'm going to highlight them all, and I'm going to just say, cut them. I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm just going to paste those in. They need to be at the beginning, because normally these will be showing first before you actually start going through your presentation. Now, with these, what you need to do to create, we have to create a custom show. And what I want is for each of these slides to loop round at 5-second intervals. So I need to tell PowerPoint, okay, after 5 seconds, move to the next slide. After another 5 seconds, move to the next one, so on and so forth. And to do that, what we do is we go into, I can never remember where it is, slideshow, that's it, and rehearse timings. And this will allow you to time the first few slides so that you have them there for just 5 seconds. So if I click rehearse timings, you'll see right in the top corner, if I move that down, can you see a clock ticking through? So I'm going to wait 5 seconds, and then I'm going to manually move it onto the next slide. So it's recording the timings that I'm using, and I'm moving this. I'm clicking the mouse after 5 seconds for each slide. So we'll just do all of these. 5 seconds seems like a long time when you're waiting for it. I'm not sure where the text is on this slide. I'm sure there was text on this one. And there we go. And then once you're finished, click the cross to come out. And what PowerPoint will say is your slideshow is 46 seconds long. Do you want to save these slide timings? And I'm going to say yes. So my first 5 slides have timings on them. So what I can do now is set up what we call a custom slideshow. And that's on the same ribbon. We have custom slideshow. And I'm going to go to custom shows. And I'm going to create a new one. And what I'm going to do is, you could change the name. I'm going to call this, let's call it looping introduction. Looping intro will do. And then you select the slides that you want to use in your slideshow. So I'm just going to do the first 5 that we've got timings for and click Add. And OK. So I now have a custom show set up. So I would do all of this before I gave my presentation. OK, I would set all of this up as a custom show. And then when it came time to actually do the presentation, if I want these to loop round, what I would do is go to Set Up Slideshow. And I'm going to select my custom slideshow. So custom show, looping introduction is the correct one. I'm going to say use timings. So it's going to use those 5-second timings. And I'm going to click on OK. And then what happens is when I'm presenting or when people are arriving, I can just start my slideshow. Now I'm not going to touch it at all, but you should see that after 5 seconds, it moves on to the next slide. And there we go. Let's just wait for it to go to the next one. And there we go. So you can put whatever you want on here. As I said, it's really good to have like a question for your audience, something for them to think about, a motivational quote, even just a nice picture, maybe your contact details, whatever it might be, okay? So I do like to add those in at the beginning. That may or may not be something that you've come across before, but I think that's quite useful. And just finally, because I am aware of the time, I just want to go into telling you about, if you go into view, I just want to highlight the slide sorter view as well. Now, this is a view I like to go in. If I have quite a large presentation, I want to do lots of moving around of slides, I tend to go into here because I find it a lot easier to organize my slides. And I'm literally just clicking and dragging them around. So I quite like this view when it comes to organizing. And something else which I like to add sometimes are, if I go back to normal view, are slide transitions. And transitions are really sort of how your slides move on to the next one. So do you want, when your slides move to the next slide, do you want it to kind of spin in, or do you want it to wipe across the screen, or do you just want it to fade in and fade out? It's always nice to be able to apply some nice slide transitions as well. So those are there under the transitions menu. I'm so conscious of the time. We've just slightly gone over and I do want to answer some questions. So I'm going to leave it there. Does anybody have any questions? I can see the question panel blinking. Okay, let me go through some of these. So Yinka has put, will this recording be sent to everyone? Yes, it will, Yinka. If you are attending this and if you registered for the webinar, you will receive it on Friday. Someone's put, when does daylight savings time commence in London? Oh, I couldn't tell you. I'm one of those people who never knows when daylight saving time is. I will need to look that up, Richard, I'm afraid. Is there a way to keep the file size down when using large background images? I ask this because every time I use large images, my file size increased as well. Let me think. Yes, you could. I mean, you can compress images. I'm not sure. I know you can in Word. I'm not sure if you can in here. Let me just have a little look around. There is an option in Word for compressing images. I'm not sure if you have it in PowerPoint, which kind of optimizes the image. Let me click on an image, that might help. Yes, so there's a compressed pictures option just here. So that compresses the pictures in the document to reduce the size. So just click on the image and compress the size of the image, and that will help keep that file size down, Kimberly. Lloyd has put, will there be a replay or a place to access the webinar? Yes, the recording will be sent out as well as the presentations that I am using. Dee Dee, when you use the looping intro, how do you continue with your presentation? That's a great question, Dee Dee, because do you know what? This is something which has confused me for a long time. So the question there was, when you use this looping presentation, how do you then continue with the rest of your presentation? Because as Dee Dee's rightly pointed out, this part will continue to loop around until you come out of it. And what happens is when you go back to the presentation, if I then say, right, I want to start from the Oscars, if I go into the slideshow, it goes back to my custom slideshow. And this confused me. I thought, how on earth can I get it to come out of this? what you need to do is once you've finished with your looping slides, and this again might be when everybody's just kind of settled down and you're about to start, you need to go into slideshow and you need to remove the custom slideshow. A little bit annoying, and then it will let you go back in and continue on with your presentation. All right. I don't know if you actually have to delete it, or you might just be able to turn off the custom slideshow. Yeah, so your custom slideshow will be selected. Just put it back to all, and then you can carry on with the presentation. What else have we got in here? Can you insert a countdown clock on a slide? Ooh, that's interesting. I can't think of a utility within PowerPoint that lets you do that. Just trying to think of a way that you could do that. Countdown clock. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure there probably is a way. There isn't an option within PowerPoint specifically related to a countdown clock. That might be something that Google will know. I'm sure there is somebody out there who has put a countdown clock on a slide. When the picture does not fit the slide like it does here, is there a way to not distort the pic by resizing? Yeah, the only thing you can really do, so if you have a picture, for example, and you want it to take up the whole slide, if you hold down your shift key as you're dragging the corner, it will resize it. Now, that's as big as it can go without distorting. That's what I'm stuck with. If I wanted to use this image in the entire background, you know, the only thing I can do is do that, and that looks terrible. So what I would say is this is more about image selection, getting a size of image that's going to work on your slide. The other thing I would say is watch out for the size of your slide. If you go into the design ribbon, you'll see you have slide size over here. Now I'm using a widescreen version because I use pretty much almost exclusively wide screens, and this just works better for me. But most people will use a standard size, and I find the images tend to fit slightly better. You don't have to stretch them out like I did when you're using the standard slide size. But really it's about image selection. Try and select a large image, because then you can sort of move it. Images are better when you reduce the size rather than make them bigger. But some images, it's a bit hard to get around that distortion. It's just about image selection, I'm afraid. Those are all of the questions that I have in the questions panel. Let me just quickly look at the chat panel to see if we have any. Oh, we have lots coming in. They are scrolling up. Let's have a look. Is it possible to use keyboard navigation rather than mouse when presenting, particularly thinking about selecting hyperlinks? Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you'll see as we hover over various different things. Now, I use keyboard mainly when I'm doing slides, so I use my arrow keys to move through my slides. When it comes to selecting, I would use my mouse for that. I don't know of a keyboard shortcut that will kind of move you to a selection on your slideshow. Unfortunately, you might have to kind of do a combination of keyboard shortcuts and mouse. Some people are saying thank you. Thanks. No problem. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's have a look. When you added the 3 billboards image to slide number 2 and resized it, the actors' faces were stretched vertically because you had switched lock aspect ratio off. Yes, that's correct. I'm not sure if that is the best option, especially if the image is being certain. Yeah, it might not necessarily be the best option to turn lock aspect ratio off for you. I was just showing you a way that you can do that, because I know that some people do sometimes put images in and then they're getting very specific about this size by typing it into this panel up here and wondering why it doesn't kind of stick, it keeps moving. And I'm just showing you a way really that you can stop that from happening. But yes, distortion, you don't want distortion, so you need to sort of work it out whatever's best for the image that you're using. Someone's put, I really like the looping. I know, it's cool, isn't it? And the dimming as well. Yeah, dimming, these are all good things. Let's have a look. I'm looking through that. I think that's pretty much it. That's all I can see. It's a bit hard to kind of scroll through and see absolutely everything that people are putting. But I will say that if you do have any other questions, then please feel free to come through to me. And I'm not sure if I've got my email address up there. I'll pop my email address into the chat panel if you have any other questions. So you can email me if you want to. So like so my email address is deborah.ashby@filtered.com. And if you have any questions about this webinar, then please feel free to email through. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Did everybody enjoy that? Did you pick up any tips? I'm sure there's some stuff in there that you know, but hopefully a couple of things in there which you were unaware of. Did anybody pick up anything good? Yes? Oh, good. That makes me very happy. I'm very, very pleased to hear. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go because we are a little bit over. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I will speak to you next week, or I think I'm back for some more Excel. So all my Excel people who are on today, I will speak to you next week. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell icon to keep up to date with our latest content. Happy learning!